Chapter 871, I am the head of the investigation team in the Jiangnan region. After boarding, Zhang Yi was carefully inspected again before being taken inside the cabin. The shackles on his hands were specially made, dark metal that glowed red. They were miniature bombs. If Zhang Yi tried to break free or resist, they would be detonated immediately. The captain, Kieran Connor, could not wait and immediately had him brought before him. Looking at the ordinary-looking yellow man in front of him, a smile appeared on his face. "Tell me, what is your name and what position do you hold in the Huashu Kingdom?" Zhang Yi looked up at him and said indifferently, "My name is Zhang Yi. I am the head of the investigation team in the Jiangnan region." Upon hearing these words, Connor was confused. After all, they basically did not deal with the Jiangnan region on a daily basis, and they were not quite sure what an investigation team leader meant. It was just that the name Zhang Yi sounded slightly familiar to him. Zhang Yi, I feel like I've heard that name somewhere. However, the next moment, he saw the young man with yellow skin raise the corners of his mouth in a cruel smile. Connor's brain speed suddenly increased. He thought of an incident that had attracted the attention of many people internationally some time ago. The Neon Ronin landed in the Jiangnan region of the Huashu Kingdom, and then there was a rebellion by the captain-level figures in Jiangnan. And the person who turned the tide and calmed the crisis was called Zhang Yi. Shit! Connor's pupils contracted and he cursed. But Zhang Yi's hands had already appeared to be covered in black, flaming substance, which directly melted away the sturdy handcuffs. If you don't do it, you won't get away with it. After all, in order to protect the secret of the source of God, he must break with the Columbia Navy. So, there is no need to feel any hesitation. Everyone on this ship today must die. The surging power of the void erupted directly in the cabin of the USS Copernicus. No one on the entire ship could imagine that, on this vast expanse of ice-covered sea, on an inconspicuous civilian ship, Connor was less than 3 meters away from Zhang Yi, and between life and death, he used his own superpower for the first time. Dragon Beast form. A layer of green scales covered his entire body, and his body also shot up to more than 3 meters tall. His hands had even turned into a pair of huge, terrifying, more than 1 meter long sharp claws. USS Copernicus Captain, Lieutenant Commander Kieran Connor, had a supernatural index of 6,500 points. Throughout the entire Columbus Ocean Fleet, he was also a top-level supernatural person. But at this time, Zhang Yi was racing against time. So he would not spare any of his combat power. The void flames wrapped around Zhang Yi's body and burned fiercely, before spreading crazily in all directions. Zhang Yi himself brandished the Holy Judgment and charged straight at Kieran Connor himself. Connor's pair of indestructible dragon claws were caught like tofu the instant they touched the Holy Judgment, which was burning with the black flames of the void. The Holy Judgment severed his pair of enormous dragon claws and cleaved straight down along his skull. Without any hindrance, his entire body was cleaved vertically from head to toe, splitting him directly in half. Ah! Zhang Yi let out a roar, and without stopping for a moment, he swung the horizontal sword in his hand, beginning to wreak havoc on the entire ship. What he had to do was to break the USS Copernicus's communication system to prevent contact between here and the Ocean Fleet headquarters on Rope Island. Although doing so would definitely make the other party aware of the abnormality at the first opportunity, at the very least, it would allow the other party to misjudge his strength. As long as the other party did not know that he, representing the highest combat power in the Jiangnan region, had arrived at the ocean, their response would not be timely or accurate. The time he bought was Zhang Yi's chance to escape. Boom! Zhang Yi unleashed his full combat power. It was as if he was dismantling a Gundam with his bare hands. He wanted to destroy the entire ship and kill every single soldier. Facing such a top-tier alien with superhuman combat power, the soldiers on the USS Copernicus were powerless to resist. Even the Columbia Navy soldiers, armed to the teeth and proud of the world's strongest navy, were like paper when they met Zhang Yi. The flames of the void burned fiercely, but the way they killed was not by burning, but by direct erasure. In this regard, Zhang Yi's way of killing was very humane. They didn't even have time to feel the pain before they were swallowed up by the void. On the Golden front, Cha Haicheng and the others were still jeering Zhang Yi and the others. They had seen with their own eyes Zhang Yi being handcuffed, and old Tian and the others had thrown down their weapons without saying a word, so they began to let out their pent-up emotions. "Hey, you guys, weren't you arrogant in the past? Well, you can't be arrogant now. I'm a citizen of Colombia, and you're only fit to be slaves and serve us from now on." Old Tian and the others just looked at them coldly without saying anything in response. They trusted Zhang Yi very much, so they didn't bother to pay any attention to these clowns. However, this approach made Cha Haicheng and the others feel that they were afraid. But just then, from the distant USS Copernicus, there was suddenly a deafening explosion. Everyone's attention was drawn there. The USS Copernicus, 5 nautical miles away, was emitting plumes of black smoke, which did not look right. However, it was too far away for anyone to see clearly what was going on there. Several Columbia soldiers were stunned. They were dumbfounded and couldn't understand why there was an abnormality on the advanced USS Copernicus. One soldier quickly took out a walkie-talkie and tried to contact them. But the next moment, a person jumped off the deck for no reason. Zhang Yi's eyes were extremely terrifying. They were the coldest murderous intent after killing many people. Swish, swish. The holy judgment was waved twice casually in the air, tracing a few elegant arcs. The 6 Columbia Marines on board did not react to what was going on, and their bodies were split into 7 or 8 pieces. Their heads were split in half, and their arms and legs were broken in 2. They died in an instant, without feeling a thing, and not even their eyes had any expression of fear. Silence. An extremely oppressive silence. Everyone in the rock flow group was stunned by Zhang Yi's sudden appearance and his sudden killing of all the naval soldiers. Zhang Yi made a handsome flourish with his sword, and with a forceful swing, a large pool of blood splattered onto the deck. He didn't even look at Cha Haicheng and the others next to him. Instead, he said to old Tian, "Leave here at full speed immediately, and shut down all radar and communication systems." Even if the Columbia Navy had the most powerful reconnaissance capabilities, as long as they shut down all communication devices, the other party would be unable to find them. But doing so would also come at a great cost. If the other party could not find them, they would also lose their way in the vast ocean. It was like a person traveling in the night. If you extinguished the light in your hand, it would be difficult for others to find you. But you yourself would also enter the darkness. However, for now, Zhang Yi had no choice but to do so. Otherwise, when the large force of the Columbia Navy and the top-notch foreigners arrived, even he could not guarantee his safety. Chapter 872, Lord of the Ocean. Old Tian received Zhang Yi's order and, without saying a word, immediately arranged for someone to go over and operate. As an old sailor, he naturally understood the danger of doing so. But for the moment, this was their only choice. With the lights off, everyone was wandering in the dark forest, and only the weak would have a chance to survive. Otherwise, they would be killed by the strong. The members of the rock flow group stared at Zhang Yi in disbelief. They were still unclear about what had happened so far. Boom! 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 The sound of explosions continued to echo in the distance, sending terrifying ripples of sound that affected the Golden front. Everyone looked over and saw that the mighty Columbia warship USS Copernicus was burning with flames, and then the ship quickly tilted and began to sink. That warship has been sunk. Li Zhongyu was full of disbelief. These people had no idea what the outside world had become. They also had no way of understanding the destructive power of an outsider of Zhang Yi's rank. But for now, the USS Copernicus was truly finished. Zhang Yi, however, appeared on the Golden front unscathed. The answer was self-evident. Zhang Yi had destroyed a powerful Columbia warship single-handedly. Everyone looked at Zhang Yi as if they were looking at a monster, or even more so, a god. Even Su Nuanqi, who was the most talkative, held back the words she wanted to use to blame Zhang Yi. She was completely dumbfounded. However, at the moment, there were some people whose expressions were like ashes, filled with fear and despair. It was just a few seconds ago that Cha Haicheng and the others, who had been laughing at Zhang Yi and old Tian, were still in full swing. They had thought that the situation was already decided, and that they had used their intelligence to destroy Zhang Yi and the others on the Golden Front. And they had even secured the protection of the Colombian Navy, so they could live happily ever after. But the disillusionment was sudden and unexpected. They had thought themselves invincible, that the mighty Colombian Navy had no match, but a single cruiser of the Chuanpu class had been sunk by Zhang Yi single-handedly. He was no human, he was a monster. The betrayers could already feel death approaching. However, Zhang Yi didn't even look at them, and the pressure was unbearable. Cha Haicheng let out a gulp sound in his throat, and he raised his hand, barely managing to force a servile smile. That. Mr. Zhang, let me explain. Zhang Yi didn't even look at him, but walked towards the cabin on his own, where he was going to call Zhou Qi. He also needed to explain the situation to Zhu Zheng and ask him to send someone to help. Zhu Zheng would definitely find a way. Unless he was willing to give up important information about the source of God. Zhu Lark walked over to Zhang Yi with a face full of embarrassment. I'm sorry, I just thought. Contact Commander Zhu. This is the last time. After that, your communication device will basically not be used again for a short period of time. Zhu Lark was already scared at this point, and the pressure just brought to bear on her by the Colombian Navy had been too strong. And an even stronger sense of pressure came from the person who had sunk the USS Copernicus, Zhang Yi. But then we'll be like headless chickens, won't we? There's no other way right now, we just have to take things as they come. What had happened had been so sudden that Zhang Yi hadn't really thought about what would happen next. But at the very least, for now, they had to get out of this dangerous place and call for help. Zhang Yi and Zhu Lark went to Zhu Lark's room. Tommy's loud sobs made Zhang Yi frown, and Zhu Lark closed her eyes tightly, trying to calm her anger. She regretted the decision more than once. Bringing along the child was not only a huge burden, but also pointless. She called over Su Nuanchi and told her to take the child somewhere else quickly, so as not to delay them from doing their real job. Then she closed the door, took out her communication device and contacted Zhu Zheng. Zhang Yi quickly informed Zhu Zheng of the incident. Zhu Zheng's face did indeed turn extremely serious, because a head-on collision with the Colombian Navy was the last thing they wanted to see. But since it had already happened, there was no point in hiding. Have you obtained the information from the source of God? Zhu Zheng inquired. Zhang Yi gave a small smile and then pointed at his own head. Zhu Zheng was silent for a moment, rubbing the back of his hand, and Zhang Yi could tell that he was hesitating. But after a few seconds, Zhu Zheng said, Zhang Yi, your ability is enough to support the ship drifting at sea. What you did was correct. Temporarily cut off all external contact, and never let them find out. I will use every means to support you. Zhang Yi said, okay, just do as you say. I'll wait for reinforcements at sea. He didn't ask for much. The situation looked dangerous, but it wasn't actually safe at all. But that wasn't the case for Zhang Yi. As a last resort, he had one last plan, which was to abandon the entire boat and leave with Zhou Qi alone. It all depended on how important Zhu Lark was to Zhu Zheng. Anyway, he and Zhou Qi will be fine. Zhu Zheng continued, next, you must change course and no longer pass through the waters around Neon. It would be best to detour from the southwest. If you get there, I will have the Rose Squad join you, they are just on a mission in the southwest waters. Remember, a warning appeared in Zhu Zheng's eyes, do not engage in head-on conflict with the Colombian Navy. Because according to the current information, there is an alien with a supernatural ability index of 18,000 in their ocean fleet. His codename is Lord of the Ocean. It is because of the existence of this person that the East China Sea region has found it very difficult to expand into the ocean area. Therefore, you must not rely on your own strength and engage them head-on. Zhu Lark didn't react much to this. Because she simply didn't understand what 18,000 points of ability index meant. But Zhang Yi felt a chill run down his back. That was a powerful alien with an ability index nearly twice as high as his, a powerful Epsilon class being. Zhang Yi took a deep breath. I understand. I will head towards the southwestern sea. Zhu Jing reassured him, you don't need to worry too much. Out on the vast ocean, it's like looking for a needle in a haystack for them to find your position. It's not that easy. And I will also try to find a way to get reinforcements for you. Delay the forces of the Columbus Ocean Fleet. The only possible reinforcements Zhu Jing was talking about could only be one, the East Sea region, the only region that could contend with the Columbus Ocean Fleet in the ocean region. Among the 6 major regions of the Huaxu Kingdom, the East Sea region has the most powerful navy, and its strength is even close to that of the Xinjiang region, which has the strongest comprehensive strength. Zhang Yi curiously asked, does the East Sea region also have Epsilon-class aliens? Zhu Zheng's gaze was ethereal. In this regard, the East Sea region has never admitted it. But I think there is a high possibility. Chapter 873, Escape into the Darkness. After listening to Zhu Zheng's words, Zhang Yi's heart was slightly relieved. However, after the call ended, they could only drift blindly at sea for the next part of the journey. Without the guidance of an advanced navigation system, they could only rely on the sailing experience of the old crew members such as Old Tian, and grope their way towards the southwestern waters, in order to bypass the pursuit of the Columbus Ocean Fleet. Zhu Lark also wanted to say something to Zhu Jing. However, Zhu Jing only told her lightly that she should follow Zhang Yi's orders from now on. Zhu Lark nodded obediently. The communication was quickly over, and Zhang Yi confiscated the communication device directly to prevent Zhu Lark from suddenly going crazy and contacting the outside world on her own in the future. I'll return it to you after we get back to shore, said Zhang Yi. Zhu Lark pouted, you just don't trust me. Zhang Yi nodded, you do have some self-awareness. Zhu Lark was furious, but she could only clench her fists and sulk alone. Zhang Yi ignored her and first returned to the room to bring Zhou Qi out of the dark room. Then he briefly explained the situation to her and led her to the control room in front. We'll be drifting at sea for the next while, but don't worry too much. As long as I'm here, no one can harm you. Zhang Yi said, giving Zhou Qi a deep look. But you have to be careful not to develop feelings for anyone on board. Because we have to abandon them at any time and leave on our own. Zhou Qi pursed her lips and said with a bright smile, don't worry, I'm not a fool like Zhu Lark. We've been through so many life and death crises together, I know what choice to make. Zhang Yi nodded in satisfaction. The girl who had undergone the cruel baptism of the end of the world was sensible. The two of them went to the control room. At this time, the entire ship had completely shut down all communication equipment, and even the communicators in everyone's hands had been confiscated by Old Tian. Anything that could possibly send a signal outwards must be eliminated. Otherwise, they might be hit by an ICBM attack in a few minutes. Zhang Yi had never tried to use the dimensional portal to absorb an ICBM. But according to his speculation, with his current strength, trying to absorb that kind of terrifying power would risk the collapse of the alternate space. This was the power of the top weapons and equipment of human technology, which could still not be underestimated. Zhang Yi looked at the cabin where all the electronic devices had been turned off. Old Tian handed him a nautical chart. We have followed your instructions and are heading due west at full speed. But to get back to the Huaxu Kingdom, we would have to sail at least 5,000 nautical miles, which is more than 9,000 kilometers. And without a navigation system, we have to rely on human experience to find our way, so it's hard to say how long we will be adrift at sea. And even. Old Tian licked his dry lips, his tone hesitant. Zhang Yi said, just say what you have to say, this is not the time for sweet talk. Old Tian said, it wouldn't be surprising if we were to drift at sea for half a year. Zhang Yi frowned slightly, but this situation was also within his expectations. Never mind that for now, just head west. We don't lack supplies, so it's fine to spend a bit more time. The key is to avoid the Great Ocean Fleet. He reached out and nodded at the map. If they headed all the way west and a little further north, they would reach the area of the South Pacific Islands. Once we get there, I'll have a plan. Zhang Yi's tone was very certain. This surprised old Tian and the others. But if our ship is seen around here, it will definitely be discovered by the surrounding countries. It's hard to guarantee that they won't report it to the Columbia Navy on Rope Island. Zhang Yi said indifferently, I naturally have a way, so don't worry, just do as I say. He wasn't going out to sea unprepared this time. The current situation, although very troublesome, was also within his plan. It wasn't because he was a genius, but simply because he was used to considering things in the worst possible light, so as to be fully prepared. When old Tian and the others heard Zhang Yi say this, their hearts, which had been full of insecurity, felt a little safer. Everyone hurriedly got back to their duties and steered the Golden Front at full speed towards the Western Sea. As for what would happen next, Zhang Yi didn't know either. He could only take things one step at a time. His greatest hope might still lie in Zhu Jing's arrangements. Mr. Zhang, what should we do with those guys? Old Tian gave a wink outside. Mentioning them made Zhang Yi's eyes narrow immediately, and the undisguised murderous intent made old Tian unable to help but swallow. He had rarely seen such an angry Zhang Yi. And at times like this, only blood could slightly ease the rage in his heart. If it weren't for those few dogs from Cha Haicheng informing on them, they would have been able to pass through the patrol area of the Columbia Navy in no time. Once they entered the territorial waters of the Huashu Kingdom, they would be completely safe. But they never expected that they would fail because of those few dogs in the end. Let's go and talk to them. Zhang Yi's face was smiling, an exceptionally bright smile. Old Tian and the crew members also had murderous intent in their eyes. No one didn't hate those sons of bitches. They walked out of the cabin. At this time, 2 crew members were holding guns in their hands, watching over them on the deck. Cha Haicheng, Biamo, Xia Yunfan, Eisenman, and Rudolph, the 5 of them were kneeling on the deck, trembling. Not far away, the people from the Rock Flow group were also there. However, their eyes were full of concern, but they didn't really care about the lives of these people. They were here waiting for Zhang Yi to come over and tell them the situation. Su Nuanqi was hiding behind Zhu Lark, her face pale. When the Columbia soldiers arrived just now, she also wanted to come with those people. She was afraid that Zhang Yi would also settle accounts with them. However, Zhang Yi only gave her a cold look. He knew that Su Nuanqi had not participated in this activity. She usually spent time with Zhu Lark and did not have the conditions to do so. The point is, she was such a stupid person that the guys in the group like Cha Haicheng would never have taken her along. She was either bad or just plain stupid. But stupid people are often more annoying than bad people. Zhang Yi walked onto the deck. As soon as Cha Haicheng saw Zhang Yi, he immediately began to kneel on the ground and bang his head on the ground, shouting, Mr. Zhang, I am innocent. They forced me to do it. Please forgive me this time. I will be a good dog for you. I will do whatever you tell me to do. Bimo's face turned pale as he watched Zhang Yi's incessant pleas. Don't kill me, I know I was wrong. Please no, please. Zhang Yi's face, however, had calmed down. He crouched down and his gaze swept over everyone's faces. Cha Haicheng and the others felt as if a sword had been drawn across their faces. Some of them had even urinated in their pants. Tell me, how did you manage to do it? Zhang Yi asked indifferently. Chapter 874, Skewers of Meat. Soon, the few people who wanted to live told the entire plan. Chef Xia Changming, who was originally watching the show, suddenly turned black. Mr. Zhang, I definitely had no conspiracy with them. Zhang Yi glanced at Chef Xia Changming and said indifferently, I know, you can't be blamed for this. If I really have to be blamed, as the captain, I should be the first person responsible. Chef Xia Changming's heart immediately felt lighter upon hearing this, and he couldn't help but feel a little moisture in his eyes. It was really rare to encounter such a good leader who didn't shirk his responsibilities. Drag that woman over here too. Zhang Yi pointed at Kim Kimi in the crowd. When Cha Haicheng and the others tried to run, Kim Kimi was dumbfounded. Because from beginning to end, Cha Haicheng had kept the secret and never told Kim Kimi the purpose of making her do it. She was just a puppet, and after spending so much time in the Silla entertainment industry, she had also learned not to ask too many questions. Chef Xia Changming, in order to show off, walked over, grabbed Kim Kimi by the hair, dragged her to the ground, and threw her onto the deck. Kim Kimi was in tears from the pain and kept begging Zhang Yi for mercy. "Mr. Zhang, I had no idea about this. It was all Cha Haicheng, he told me to do it." Cha Haicheng angrily scolded, "Damn bitch, what does this have to do with me? Don't slander me recklessly, I was also coerced." Kim Kimi couldn't help but become angry when she saw Cha Haicheng shirking the blame like this. She shouted at the top of her lungs at him, "You despicable scum, you planned to escape on your own, and you didn't even take me with you when you left. In your eyes, am I just a tool?" Cha Haicheng scolded, "Dirty bitch, how dare you talk back to me? If it weren't for me, you'd still be in Silla right now, taking turns to entertain those chaebol every day. I gave you the honor of being the prosecutor's wife, and you have to pay for it, by submitting to me completely." Zhang Yi just silently watched them tear each other apart, biting each other in the face of a life-or-death crisis, even if they had to take each other down with them. When the Columbia Navy arrived, Kim Kimi was also at a loss for what to do, and obviously she had no knowledge of the matter. So Zhang Yi could spare her life because she was still of some value. "Lao Xia, are you interested in this woman?" Zhang Yi asked Chef Xia Changming. Chef Xia Changming froze for a moment and hurriedly shook his head. No, Mr. Zhang, please feel free to dispose of her, I have no opinion." Zhang Yi waved his hand, "You can keep her." Zhang Yi of course knew what Kim Kimi had been doing on the ship for half a month. She was just a silly woman with some looks but no brains, and had been used as a tool by Cha Haicheng. It was said that she had even gone so far as to perform in an alternative dance show in order to win the favor of a certain chaebol. Instead of killing her, it would be better to give her to Chef Xia Changming as a favor. Catching people's hearts was also something a boss needed to do. Chef Xia Changming couldn't help but feel moved when he heard that Zhang Yi was treating him so well. Although there were some women at the Chaoyu base, the good-looking ones had long been picked up by the upper echelons of the base. He was of course happy to have someone like Kim Kimi as his woman. Chef Xia Changming walked over and pulled Kim Kimi aside, first giving her a fierce warning. "From now on, you are my woman. You must listen to Mr. Zhang and me obediently, and never have any other thoughts." Kim Kimi was in a state of shock. Her face was pale. Now that she was able to survive, she was naturally willing to do anything. She nodded repeatedly to show her agreement. Cha Haicheng saw that she was able to survive, and hurriedly cried out, "As long as I can survive, I will do whatever you say. I will do anything. Please have mercy." Zhang Yi walked over slowly, smiling at them all. "Now, I can have a nice chat with you. I'm very curious as to why you would choose to betray me when you could be living a good life." The several people looked pale, and none of them dared to speak. Zhang Yi's smile grew even wider. "If you tell me, I can let him die quickly. If you don't speak, you will surely regret it." The faces of the men grew increasingly ugly, and they kept on begging for mercy by kowtowing. "We didn't want to harm you, we just wanted to go to Columbia," Biamo cried. "For the love of God, please spare me." Zhang Yi laughed, "Sorry, I'm not religious. Anything else you want to say?" Engineer Eisenman pretended to remain calm. "You can't kill us. You've already sunk a Columbia warship, and now it's been revealed that you're holding us hostage. If you massacre any more Columbia citizens, that will be an additional crime. Let us live, so at least you have something in your hands to bargain with the Columbia Navy with." Zhang Yi couldn't help but burst out laughing. As he laughed, his gaze became cold and full of contempt. "You think too highly of yourselves. If you were even the slightest bit valuable, they would have come and taken you a long time ago. But in reality, you are insignificant and worthless. You actually think you are valuable and that they will hesitate to kill you? Don't even dream about it, you know nothing about the end times. He stood up. Well, it seems that you are all mouth and no substance, and I don't have the heart to play with you anymore. Since you have chosen the most painful way to die, of course I will grant your wish. Upon hearing Zhang Yi say this, the few people kneeling on the ground wailed desperately. You can't do this to us. We just want to live well, what is our fault? Zhang Yi didn't want to continue talking to them. But upon hearing these words, he couldn't help but turn back and ask in return, then let me ask you, after you got on the ship, have I ever mistreated you? Did I ever shortchange you on food? These words left the group speechless. Xia Yunfan argued, but you killed Yamada Masanami and the other Neon people, and that makes people think. You can't blame us. Zhang Yi raised an eyebrow. You see, you always have so many excuses. And my opinion is, add some more oil. No one understood what Zhang Yi meant by the last sentence. But they soon found out. Zhang Yi asked with a smile, have you ever eaten skewered food? This kind of food was not common abroad. Xia Yunfan, as a Chinese national, often went back to his home country and knew that it was a specialty of the Huashu kingdom. I have eaten it, Zhang Yi nodded, that's good. He turned around and said to old Tian and the others, chop them all up and make skewers out of them, and grill them on the bow of the ship. It would be hard to quell Zhang Yi's hatred in his heart without cutting these traitors up with 1,000 swords. Chapter 875 John Cardills. Zhang Yi took Shokir back to the cabin. However, he told old Tian that everyone on the ship must be brought to the scene to see for themselves what happened to the traitors. Everyone, including those in the lower cabins, was brought up to the deck. Julark and Sunuanchi were no exception. There was no excuse to be made, they had to witness the execution of the traitors with their own eyes. However, the scene was too cruel, and Zhang Yi was a kind-hearted person who could not bear to witness it with his own eyes, so he took Shokir and left. Soon, the screams of agony from outside could be heard. Old Tian asked Chef Xia Changming to be the main executioner, as he was a good swordsman after all, being a cook. According to the standards of the skewer bar, everyone had to endure a punishment of at least a few hundred sword cuts. Then they were skewered with sharpened wooden or iron skewers and left to stand on the prow. This punishment was etched in the memory of everyone on board and showed them the ruthlessness with which Zhang Yi treated traitors. Even if they closed their eyes and dared not look, the heart-wrenching howls still came to their ears. Lu Dehai, however, looked at the executed men with a calm face, a mocking smile curling the corners of his mouth. I knew you scum couldn't be trusted. Li Zhongyu, Zhang Weiwei, Ma Wenjing and the others were relieved. They had not misjudged the situation and made the wrong decision. At the same time, they were also deeply shocked by Zhang Yi's strength. Even though they were also aliens, Li Zhongyu was pitifully weak compared to Zhang Yi. They no longer dared to harbor any evil thoughts. Julark and Sunuanchi couldn't stand the scene and vomited several times. Both of them vomited their stomach juices, crying and cursing Zhang Yi's inhumanity. The execution was fine, but they were forced to watch the whole thing, which was also an extremely cruel torture for the onlookers. But complaints are complaints. Not many people sympathized with the fate of these betrayers. Because originally they would have been able to reach the other side safely in no time and live a stable life. But now, they had to continue drifting on the sea for who knows how long. And they could be sunk by Columbia's missiles at any time. All of this was because of these selfish bunch of hundreds in front of them. Zhang Yi carried out the most cruel execution on a group of traitors such as Cha Haicheng, because if he didn't, he couldn't vent his inner anger. But now that it had come to this, the voyage had to continue. In order to avoid being captured by the Columbia Navy, he had to turn off all communication equipment on the ship, including sonar and radar. Everyone's communication equipment was confiscated. At the same time, the military-grade shielding equipment on the ship was turned on. This meant that from now on, they would be blind at sea and could only navigate by their sailor's instincts. However, he was also well aware of the trouble that would be caused by the leak of intelligence from the source of God. It all depends on how Zhu Jin coordinates next. Rope Island. Columbus Ocean Fleet Headquarters. Before the storm hit, the ships in the harbor had already been sent to the deep sea. So only some small boats near the harbor were completely frozen, creating a beautiful landscape along the coastline. However, on the outskirts of the ice, there were hundreds of ships, surrounding the Rope Island naval base like the moon around the sun. The gray-white steel warships towered high like a wall of steel. The huge main guns on the warships extended more than 10 meters in length and could easily destroy a ship of thousands of tons. Deeper in the ocean, the heart of the fleet, the deep-sea monster aircraft carrier that could carry dozens of warplanes, lay silent. During the Ice Age, the super-large aircraft carriers had slowly become unsuited to the marine environment. Their huge and unwieldy bodies required exponentially more energy to operate. And nowadays, transporting energy itself is a huge problem. Even if fuel is transported from the oil-rich mainland of Colombia, the consumption en route is several times higher. No matter how you look at it, the cost-effectiveness of aircraft carriers has greatly diminished. And because their targets are so obvious, they are very easy to become the targets of the deep-sea overlords. Coupled with the extremely cold temperatures, the function of the warplanes is also greatly affected. Therefore, the existence of aircraft carriers began to be slowly replaced by smaller ships during the Ice Age. However, even without the advantages of an aircraft carrier, the Columbus Ocean Fleet, as one of Colombia's most powerful naval forces, still has the strength to dominate a sea area. Everything is in order at the naval base. The severe cold temperatures force the soldiers to wear special cold weather clothing. Naval soldiers stand guard with guns around the base. Suddenly, a muffled rumble comes from afar. This sound attracts the attention of the sailors. They looked out to sea and saw a white wave suddenly appear on the sea surface, made up of seawater and ice fragments, tens of meters above the sea surface, hurtling towards the shore. The roaring sound grew louder and louder, and it could be heard clearly throughout the Navy base on Rope Island. Sitting in the office of the Navy commander, the five-star Admiral Douglas, who was smoking a pipe, looked out the window and said indifferently, "Cardills is back. Bring him to me." The naval colonel next to him, Panca Bolcato, saluted and then turned and walked out of the office. His face was a little gloomy. "That bastard Cardills is getting more and more arrogant." The huge commotion and spectacle on the sea attracted more and more people to come and watch. The entire naval base was alerted. From the looks of it, it seems like Commander Cardills has returned. He always makes such a big fuss. But he deserves it. If I had his extraordinary abilities, I'd be even more arrogant than he is. Hey, you don't mean to say that you want to replace the Navy commander with you, do you? It's not impossible. The sailors joked easily, but when they looked out to sea, their eyes were full of envy. The huge white wave came all the way to 2 kilometers outside the naval base before anyone could clearly see what it was. Fish. Huge schools of fish. Dozens of mutant whales as huge as small mountains were leading the way, and they were followed by all kinds of mutant sea creatures, charging towards the Navy base on Rope Island. The mutant creatures were so dense that it was impossible to identify their species. It was as if the entire marine food chain had gathered here. Perched on the head of the largest whale, which was over 200 meters long, was a man wearing a blue and white combat uniform and a navy blue helmet, with only his chin exposed. The most powerful alien in the Columbia Naval Base, one of its biggest trump cards, a presence comparable in deterrence to a strategic H-class submarine, the strongest individual, Lord of the Ocean John Cardills.